Welcome back, Doug Pagitt Radio on AM 950, the voice of Minnesota. It's May 15th, at least in Minnesota. Spring has now arrived. There's a big burning star in the sky that we can see, and it gives off warmth. Doesn't hurt to be outside one bit. Hey, a couple of things came up in the news this week that I thought were interesting. In the Minnesota Star Tribune newspaper, they ran a little article that Minneapolis, and Minnesota in particular, has become the hippest town in the world. The article says that BuzzFeed at BuzzFeed.com is a website that tracks online activity and recently declared Minneapolis to be the hippest town in the world. I don't know why. I don't know what it is that they look at. They look at updates on websites. They look at how people talk about the town. They look at the hip capital that people can generate online. And they've decided that Minnesota is the hippest state, and Minneapolis is the hippest of the hip. So we have this particular culture here that apparently has a cultural sense of hipness to it. Well, how do you like that? Pretty important people. And I think that connects to another little story that came out this week in the newspaper, and it says that the Presbyterians, now if you don't know your religion very well, within Christianity you have three big streams of traditions. You have Catholics, you have Protestants, and you have the Orthodox, these really big streams. And within each of those, you have some variants of the kinds of traditions of Catholicism or the Orthodox or Protestants. And Protestants break down into, I don't know, about 90,000 different denominations, right? There's just countless numbers of them that are forming all the time. But one big group of that are the Presbyterians. And the Presbyterians had a big vote this week that if they were going to allow gay people to be their ministers, big question for them, right? What are you going to do with gay people? Now, Presbyterian churches have for a long time said, hey, gay people can be part of our church. They can attend our church. Some would even let a gay person become a member of their church. But in that tradition, along with a number of others, they have a real difference when it comes to who their clergy are going to be, who their ministers are going to be, who the people in charge. So they would say in those traditions, well, you could be gay and attend, but you can't be gay and be a minister, right?
Do you happen to know what the Anglicans do with that situation?
I do know what the Anglicans do. The Anglicans have made a decision recently that they will ordain in the United States, the Anglicans in the United States, we call them Episcopalians here. Oh. The Episcopalians have decided that you can be gay and you can be all the way up to the top level of being a bishop. Now, this isn't chess. It gets a little confusing if you don't know your religion very well. But they have a category in the Anglican world where you can be a bishop, which means that you're in charge of a whole area. Mm-hmm. It's like being the regional sales manager. Right. You get to be the one in charge of a big space like Minnesota. You could be the bishop of this entire area. They still run this agrarian notion of like the state that you live in or the location that you're in is a big deal for their religious organizing. Where most of us don't worry about our religion based on where we live, right? We're not like inside of little kingdoms where you cross one land and you move into another kingdom or something. But they still organize that way because they started forming, back in the 1500s and so on. So they would say, yeah, you could be a gay person all the way up to being a bishop. And you know when they made that vote? They made that vote back in 2003. Where did they make that vote? Here's where the articles come together. In Minnesota. So it was in Minnesota when that national group of Episcopalians had their meeting and said, yep, you can be a gay bishop. They're voting on one guy in particular. Presbyterians have their vote last summer about if you can be a gay minister or not. And where were they when they had their national assembly that had that vote?
The hippest state.
The hippest state of them all. Mm-hmm. And what parish was it of all the hundreds of parishes that were going to have to vote to ratify that vote that happened last summer? The Presbyterians then said, we're going to let all of our congregations have a vote. And as soon as we reach, the percentage that we need for this to pass, then we'll know. And as it turns out, of the hundreds of parishes voting all over Presbyterian land, all over the country, where was it that the vote was taken that pushed it over the top? In the hippest state.
Yeah.
How do you like that? And the Lutherans had to decide, are they going to allow gay people to be clergy in their world? The Lutherans. So they had a big national get-together. And they voted, and they said in 2009, yes, you can be homosexual and be a part of the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America. And when they were having that big national get-together, where were they having that national get-together? In the hippest state in the whole country. I don't... Maybe I'm getting all Glenn back here, right? Maybe I'm making connections where there aren't any connections, and I start to sound a little crazy.
Seem to be pretty clear connections.
But isn't it interesting that the Anglicans happen to have a national meeting all the time, right? A regular rhythm of these. Every couple of years they have them. They move all over the country. The year that they happen to have it in Minnesota is the big thing about gay bishops.
Is this like the Olympics where like all the less hip states have to make bids?
I think they do. I think they all have to make bids. And I think, these people are saying, well, if we're going to have these, these kinds of decisions being made of what kind of updated religion we're going to be and what we do, who we include or not, where do they decide to have it? Hipville.
That's right.
Now, here's what's funny about that. Minnesota doesn't strike me as a particularly hip place, right? Like you can see if that were happening in San Francisco or maybe in Portland or in Atlanta, but to us Minnesotans, just little humble us, we don't tend to think about Minnesota as being all that culturally forward.
Uptown's pretty hip, but
right,
we have our fair share of rural area.
Right, like you might have a 3-mile square radius where you'd find some hipness. Mm-hmm. But I think there's some coincidence, something happening, something magical happening between the hip state and these changes that are happening in religion. Now, there's some people, many people actually, who don't think these kinds of changes are a very good idea. Maybe they even want to call in and let us know. I'm not even advocating one way or the other. I actually think it's a little bit silly that these denominations make a distinction between their clergy and the regular people. Like, I don't think it's a big deal to say that you're going to let regular people, like regular old gay people, be clergy. I think the weird thing is that they organize around having a distinction between the official religious people and just the commoners. That's the part I've never understood. How you have different rules for who's going to be your pastor versus who's going to be your follower. Like, where in Christianity do you get a notion that if you are the pastor, you have a higher standard than if you are just a regular old Joe? Where would sort of like saying, hey, I want to be a follower of God in the way of Jesus, and I want to do this Christian thing, but I want there to be class differences between religious people and religious leaders? Seems totally bizarre to me.
I mean, they would obviously want people who are very dedicated to the faith, but I don't think, it seems kind of arbitrary to just set up rules. Right,
way. Sure. I guess you would say, well, if you're going to be the leader, the minister, the pastor, or the priest or something, we'd want you to really be into this. Mm-hmm. Then what you're really saying is, really being into it is what we all should be. And anybody who is, then could be the pastor. You wouldn't say we have a different set of rules for those people, because you would want everyone in the parish, everyone in the church, everyone in the congregation to be pursuing that same thing. Right. You'd want everyone to be that devout, right? That would be great, is if everybody was that devout. So why would you have different rules that would say, hey, you can be part of the church, you just can't actually say anything, lead a sermon, or hand out anything unless you follow this other set of rules? That's what I find interesting. So maybe this hip little town is going to be the next place to lead that revolution. That not only do we say, yes, everyone can be in leadership, but we say, how about if we make leadership normative? How about that? Doug Pagitt Radio, religious radio. That today might have been right on that topic.
Hi, this is Susan Berkson, and Bonnie Dean and I are back.